Can a flagship mini LED TV finally take the crown in 2024, or are you still better off smashing that piggy bank to get a more expensive OLED display? Well, today we're going to find out by taking an in-depth look at the brand new 2024 TCL 75-inch QM8 TV. Now, the full name for this beast is the 75 QM851G, and by the way, as a disclaimer, this was sent to me by TCL for this review, but I'm not going to be pulling any punches, fellas, which is why we're going to jump right into those specs. This is a 75-inch 4K 144Hz QD mini LED panel with I measured 4,032 local dimming zones, which is a lot, and it does have VRR support for G-Sync and FreeSync, and in terms of the HDR support, it comes with Dolby Vision IQ, HDR10+, HDR10, and HLG, so a lot of different HDR formats, and in terms of the overall design, I do think it looks absolutely excellent. It's got thin bezels, a premium stand, a great coating, and an excellent rear design as well, and speaking of the rear, it does come with a standard VESA mount support of 400 by 400, and the screw size is M6 by 12. Now, in terms of the ports, pause if you need to, but do be aware, yes, it does have HDMI 2.1. It has one port that allows for up to 4K 144Hz, another one up to 4K 120Hz, and then you got two which do 4K 60Hz, one of which does have eARC. So really great stuff there, and apparently it can do up to 240 Hz at 1080p as well, which is really cool. Now, in terms of the price and the warranty, it comes in between $1,500 to $2,000 depending on the sales that are available, and it also comes with a 1-year limited warranty, which is pretty standard. So pretty good on the price and warranty overall, and the specs are looking really interesting, but how does it actually perform? Well, let's start off by talking about the color, and I gotta say, right away, my first impressions are it is very good. It's not quite as rich or saturated as Quantum.OLED can get at times, but it can get much brighter in terms of the color brightness than WOLED, and it really can have an eye-opening amount of pop when the content asks for it. It's just absolutely excellent in terms of color. If you've not ever seen a modern mini LED display, this one is surely going to wow you. Now, in terms of the actual accuracy, jumping into CalMan, as you can see here out of the box, like many other displays, it does come in a somewhat inaccurate mode for SDR. However, with some simple adjustments, I got it to be nearly perfect, which is crazy, and I will have the best settings for this display linked in my Patreon in the description below, which, by the way, does also help support future reviews, so thank you to everyone who checks that out. But in terms of the HDR, unfortunately, out of the box, a little bit inaccurate both in the movie as well as the game mode, with the game mode being particularly off. Not only is it far over brightened, leading to a loss of detail and a bit of washing out, but also near the bottom, as you can see, it does not by default enable the highest local dimming zone capabilities, meaning that you might not even see true black in all situations. So definitely not ideal. Once again, with some adjustments, it can be greatly corrected. However, I was not able to fully fix it in the TV itself, so I would like to see TCL improve upon this, as that over brightening there can lead to a loss of detail, and there's just no need for that when this TV can be so bright already. Now, in terms of the color checker in SDR, it was pretty good, not perfect. As you can see, some of the colors are off. However, in HDR, it's definitely a little bit worse, and a lot of these colors do need some improvement. Now, in terms of the color volume, it does reach over 100% DCI-P3, so again, expect some really excellent colors in HDR content, far surpassing the capabilities of older SDR displays. So overall, pretty good, but it could use some improvement in the HDR. Now, in terms of the brightness and the HDR experience overall, this thing is insanely bright, and I'm saying that in the best way possible. It blows most OLEDs out of the water in terms of brightness, especially in SDR, and HDR pops off the screen in a way that even the best OLEDs will struggle to match, and certainly that's going to be the case in higher APL scenes. However, OLED definitely has its own strengths that we'll go over later, but more on the brightness. As you can see here, peak window brightness at the D65 white point, this thing is crazy. I measured over 5,000 nits in a 10% window. As you can see, even the best OLEDs pale in comparison to the brightness capabilities of this display. And even in a 100% window, we're talking 960 nits. Very, very impressive numbers. And if used correctly, this can lead to crazy good HDR imagery. But does it? Well, taking a look at a game, Baldur's Gate 3, in a high APL scenario, overall, yes, it's definitely significantly brighter than OLED, but as you can see, the top flagship OLEDs like the LG G4 are getting a little bit closer in some of these real-world scenario tests. But can it match OLED in terms of shadow detail and blooming? Well, not quite. While the shadow detail itself is very good, around the edges, you are going to notice some blooming. Now, to be fair, my camera's picking this up way more than what you're actually going to see. If you looked at this dead on, you might not even notice much of this blooming at all, but it is possible to notice at times depending on the content. And also in HDR, there's a little bit of shadow detail crush, but it's not too bad. Probably on par with most OLEDs that I see. But can it match OLED in terms of contrast ratio? The answer is not quite. However, it's very good. I measured 152,000 to 1 on the contrast ratio, at least in the test that I ran using checkerboards, which is very, very good and some of the best that I've seen on Mini LED thus far, especially considering its insane brightness. But what about for gaming? Can you use this TV for gaming? The answer is yes. It's a little bit slower in my testing than some of the fastest OLED TVs that I've measured, but it's nearly margin of error stuff here, guys, and this is going to feel very, very fast in the 144 Hz mode. Likewise, 120 Hz, yeah, it'll be a tiny bit slower, but for console gaming, also excellent. And speaking of speed, let's take a look at the motion performance. Here is where it definitely pales in comparison to OLED. OLED just simply smacks LCD in terms of its motion performance. It has near instantaneous response times. That's not the case for Mini LED, and as you can see, you cannot quite make out that this is supposed to say better than 60 Hz, even at 144 Hz on this TV. And at 120 Hz, it gets even more blurry, and at 60 Hz, it's very blurry. Now, it's certainly not horrible. I think this is acceptable, especially for a TV that's mostly going to be meant for a lot of watching and some light gaming, but it's not going to be as competitive as OLED. Now, in terms of the text clarity in the sub-pixel layout, overall, I think it's very good. It's not quite as good as a regular RGB layout, as it appears to be blue, green, red. However, it's in that 1, 2, 3 type of layout that most applications would expect, leading to some pretty good overall text and clarity. Now, in terms of the finish and perceived clarity, I got great news, it's excellent. TCL has chosen a great glossy finish that leads to excellent clarity, amazing color pop, and great ambient light handling, but it can have some rainbow-like reflections if it's hit with certain light sources. Now, in terms of the viewing angles and uniformity, like a lot of Mini LED displays, it's not great. Off angle, you will start to lose some brightness, color saturation, and contrast. Now, this is unlikely to be a big issue for most movie rooms, but if you do have some chairs or sofas far to the left or right, it definitely could be, leading to a non-ideal picture. Also, the uniformity, I did see some areas of the display that were a little bit darker than others. It wasn't quite perfect, and it's certainly nowhere near as good as QD-OLED, but it wasn't noticeably bad. It was certainly acceptable, something that I would expect to see on this type of technology. Now, in terms of the sound, I actually got good news. It's pretty good for a TV. There was no major rattling. It wasn't overly muddy. It does have some body and bass, and the timbre is okay, but it does have a slight delay, which might not make it great for gaming. You certainly could get by with the TV audio itself. You don't need to buy anything, but hey, if you're spending a lot of money on a TV, it might be worth it. for the extra oomph and detail. Now, in terms of the menu and firmware, actually, it's excellent. It's probably the fastest menu I've ever used, and it's almost entirely bug-free, leading to a pretty great experience. And then finally, VRR Flicker. Thankfully, I did not notice any major flickering, so that's great. So there you have it. TCL has definitely come out swinging this year with their brand new Mini LED TVs, and I gotta say, I was actually overall very impressed. Now, OLED certainly still does have its advantages versus Mini LED. It's gonna be faster, it's gonna give you better contrast, and of course, it's just gonna look almost perfect as long as it can get bright enough. And that's where Mini LED does have its strengths. And it is, I'm gonna be honest with you guys, getting dangerously close for the average consumer to some entry-level OLED displays, especially if you're gonna be using it in a bright room where Mini LED shows its strength. So yeah, not quite as good as OLED, but very, very good. And I certainly would recommend picking one up, especially if you can find it on sale, which I do recommend taking a look at my affiliate links in the description below to see if it is on sale, as I've noticed Mini LEDs do tend to get some pretty large sales, and if you can find one even lower than MSRP, well, you could be in a situation where you could buy, say, a 75-inch Mini LED for the same price as a 55 or 65-inch OLED, or maybe a 98-inch Mini LED for the same price as something like a 65 or 77-inch OLED TV, depending on how expensive that OLED is and the discounts available. But overall, very impressed and excited to see how much Mini LED can continue to improve and if it can eventually close the gap with OLED as more time goes on. Whether you're looking to connect a new console, gaming PC, or just need a fast and reliable HDMI cable to connect over long distances, Rupro has you covered with their certified 8K HDMI 2.1 fiber optic cable, available in sizes of up to 50 feet and can deliver a perfect full 48 gigabits per second connection over distances other cables could only dream of reaching. And with 48 gigabits per second of bandwidth, it can easily drive 8K 60 FPS or 4K 144 FPS 10-bit HDR video through its ultra-thin, flexible, and durable housing, and it even supports ER. So if you're in the market for a cable that can drive a beautiful new TV or monitor, be sure to check out Rupro on Amazon today.